Hello, everyone. Tonight we are descending into a place where light gave up, where evolution blinked and missed. A place so deep and so quiet, you could hear your own sweat drip from your brow. You've felt darkness before, but this is the kind of dark that feels like velvet shoved in your mouth, and somewhere in it, something else moves. You're walking along the path that no GPS would dare acknowledge. The air is thick smells like chalk and coins. The only sound is your own boot scraping across ancient limestone. Your flashlight, already flickering, casts long shadows against walls carved by water before mammals were even a thing. You raise the light toward a low ceiling, but there's no ceiling, just more void. And somewhere out of reach, the walls open like jaws. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. Your first mistake was assuming you were alone. That assumption ends now. You're in the middle layer of an ancient cave network in what is now northern Madagascar. Though tectonic drift and erosion make location a slippery thing to claim. The rock here is Precambrian, a fancy way of saying older than fish, older than trees. You run your fingers along the wall and feel a pattern ribbed etched. Not human, not tool-made, but definitely something that wanted to be remembered. A flicker to your left. No, not movement. Airflow. Warm but brief, like something just inhaled and didn't exhale. That would be the blind lizard, or at least the descendant of what ruled these corridors for an astonishing 20 million years longer than some continents stayed above sea level. Its name is lost. There was never a local word. Just a gesture, two fingers to the temple. Then a circle drawn in the air. It that sees without seeing. Now, the best guess is Cavernovenator ecaudatus. Though some paleontologists fight over that label like cats in a shoebox. Historians still debate whether this genus was truly eyeless or simply used regressed ocular pits to detect thermal shifts. But standing here, you're pretty sure you know the answer. You lift your flashlight again and catch the glint of calcium-embedded teeth. Hundreds of them stuck in the wall like someone fired a shotgun of bones. The cave slopes downward, and you begin the slow descent. Your boots crunch softly on the powdered floor, pulverized bone, and ancient guano. The air thins just enough to make your ears ring. You spot the first fossil, a spinal ridge taller than your waist fused into the side of the tunnel. No eyes, just a long skull, like a canoe turned sideways with nostrils far back and jaw hinges built for folding, not just biting. You press your palm against it and it's warm. That's not metaphor, it's actually warm. Maybe geothermal currents, you tell yourself. Maybe the lizard is a myth. Maybe you're not sweating out of fear. You lie to yourself so well it almost works. You slip once on a slick patch. Moss number fungus. Bioluminescent in the thinnest way. You brush it with your sleeve and it recoils. Not the fungus, the air. The air pulls back. It's here. In the old days, way old before language was printed, but after people were making bone flutes, humans stumbled into caves like this and turned around real fast. But in this one, a set of footprints was found dating back 42,000 years. Deep human prints turned inward like someone had squatted and waited. No torch fragments were found. Just the prints. And beside them, drag marks. Not claw marks, rib marks. You switch off your flashlight. Not brave, just practical. Something in you says that if it finds you, it won't be because of light or sound. It'll be because of breath, and yours is getting faster. Here's a weird fact. While your heart catches up, bats in caves like these sometimes evolve to sing in harmonics only rock can carry. Their voices bounce forever, confusing predators, but this predator didn't rely on sound. It was the sound. You hear it deep in your gut. Not a roar, not a hiss, a pressure like someone plucking a cello string inside your lungs. You step into a larger chamber. The floor is uneven limestone ridges coiling like fingers. Some are old roots that petrified into stone. Others are ribs. You find a skull not fossilized but preserved in the mineral-rich humidity. It's human. The jaw is missing, the cranium polished. A nearby scrap of obsidian tells you this one fought back. The blade is intact but bent sideways. That's not easy to do. You wonder what did it. You wonder if it's watching now. The walls here breathe, literally. The blind lizard's ancient tunnels intersect with geothermal vents, so the temperature rises and falls like a sleeping giant's chest. You count the seconds between each breath. 6, then 7, then 6 again. Rhythmic, hypnotic. You're being lulled. You sit just for a second, then you blink, and it's been 20 minutes. It knows how to wait. Back when this species thrived, the surface world was chaos. Meteor strikes flood basalt events, supervolcanoes. But down here, nothing changed. The world boiled and screamed up top, but in these caves, silence ruled. It's one of the reasons these lizards got so good at staying put. No migration, no seasons, just the long now. You stand, shake it off, keep walking. Behind you, the silence changes pitch. Something has filled the space you left. Ahead, the tunnel forks, one path goes up, the other downs. You already know which way you're going. Down. The deeper you go, the less your body agrees with your choices. Your legs itch with phantom insect bites, your mouth tastes like pennies, and your ears feel pressurized like you're under deep water. The only difference is there's no water. Just this dry, airless dark that makes your skin feel too tight and your teeth feel loose. You tap your chest to make sure you're still breathing. You are. Barely. This level of the cave, somewhere between 300 and 500 meters down, used to be part of an underwater reef system. That was around 600 million years ago. Since then, plate tectonics and rude continents shuffled the ocean away, lifted the land, and cracked it open like an old teacup. The lizard didn't mind. In fact, it thrived. It abandoned the reef and embraced the dark. You find a ledge and sit again. The rock here is slicker, smoother, almost oily. That's because countless generations of blind lizards use this very path. They didn't see it, they learned it, memorized it, followed scent trails laid down by ancestors whose eyes had long since turned to gel. Which brings us to the real mystery. How did a predator evolve without sight and still dominate one of the planet's most competitive environments? Here's the answer. It didn't need sight. Vision is a liability in a world where nothing shines. Instead, this creature turned its other senses up to 11. Eyes gone. But that tongue? Oh, that tongue was a masterpiece. It could flick through the air and pick up humidity gradients left by prey hours before. Think of it as tasting time. Historians still debate whether its tongue was bifurcated like a snake's or more clubbed and flattened like a salamander's. Either way, it used the organ like a living radar dish, sampling air slime breath. Some fossilized impressions even suggest it had tiny pores on its lips, possibly used to detect magnetic fields. You'd love to fact-check that, but the only thing more stubborn than a cave lizard is a paleontologist who hasn't had coffee. You move slowly, now guided more by airflow than by flashlight. The wind here runs strange. It doesn't blow at pulses. Short exhales like something asleep but dreaming. You realize that's not poetic. The creature may have nested here for millennia, worn its weight into the stone, left behind subtle pressure channels that still cycle with cave temperature. You can follow them if you're careful. A small chamber opens up. Your flashlight, dimmer than before, graces a wall of mineral shelves like a natural library. Inside one crevice, you see the shriveled husk of a bird. Not fossilized, just dried. You lean closer and laugh a short snort of disbelief. It's a flamingo, or at least it was, which means this cave had a surface connection at some point, which means something dragged a flamingo down here. The implications are ridiculous. Flamingos don't voluntarily go spelunking. That means the lizard or something like it went shopping. Modern cave biologists speculate that this species wasn't just stationary. It likely migrated vertically through porous systems using seasonal humidity to map routes between cave levels. It may have even surfaced to hunt in low-light conditions, twilight zones, where early mammals and birds were vulnerable. You lean your back against the wall and try to make peace with the idea of a flamingo hunting heat-sensing, blind cave lizard. That's when you spot the scratch marks. Thin, consistent, slightly curved. Not claws, not teeth. Ribs again, ribs being dragged. But not in panic, this was deliberate. Parallel tracks spaced regularly, like a ritual path, and every meter or so a round depression in the stone, like a dropped skull or an offering. Did the lizard have rituals? No one really knows. But cave animals have been known to exhibit surprising behaviors. For instance, the Texas blind salamander performs what appears to be a tremble dance to scare off rivals, pulsing its body in place to send vibrations through the rock. If a 6-inch salamander can manage a cultural display, imagine what a 20-foot blind reptile with seismic senses could pull off. You follow the trail, your knees ache, your ears pop again. The tunnel tightens, then widens into what can only be described as a hollow cathedral. The ceiling vanishes, swallowed by black. You dare not shine the light upward. You don't want to know what's clinging up there. The floor here is coated in silt. Soft, cold, silent. You step lightly and your foot sinks half an inch. That's enough to convince you something's been through here recently. You crouch and touch the silt. It sticks to your skin like frosting. There's a layer of slime beneath it. No one said evolution was clean. Here comes your off-topic fact of the night. In 1986, Soviet scientists discovered a breed of mole that used its own stomach as a hearing chamber. It didn't even have ears, just reverberation organs inside its gut lining. So if you think blind lizards with supersensory tongues are weird, know that we've got freaks living under Moscow. You step forward and spot a break in the floor, an old pitfall trap. But this one isn't natural. It's too symmetrical. The lip is beveled, the sides are ridged. Something used this, possibly to catch prey, possibly as a nest. The kicker. At the bottom, you see a rib cage, not human, not avian, definitely reptilian, smaller than what you've seen so far, possibly juvenile, possibly discarded. That's when it hits you. The light. Your flashlight flares, then fades one final pulse. And in that moment, you see it, not the creature, just the shape it left, the scrape of its belly across a stone pillar. The smear of organic residue where a tail should be, the arch of a spine that couldn't fit in a museum, let alone a mind. And then it's gone again. You turn off the flashlight on purpose now. Not because you're brave, because you don't want to see what's behind you. You listen. You wait. The breathing returns. Not yours. You press your palm to the cave wall again and try to slow your heartbeat, but it's not listening. The stone feels slick with condensation, but it's more than just moisture. There's something warm to it, like skin with a faint pulse. You draw your hand back, glance at your fingertips, just water maybe. Or maybe a secretion. Something left behind. Whatever this creature is or was, it didn't rule this cave by brute force alone. That much is obvious now. You remember the old phrase, in the land of the blind, the one who listens is king. Down here, sound is everything. Touch is law. Breath is truth. And that blind lizard, it had no need for eyes because it could feel you thinking. Its dominance wasn't just about size, though. Judging by those spinal ridges, it could have body-checked a rhino without flinching. It was how it perceived the world. Through air shifts, soil chemistry, micro-vibrations. Imagine trying to sneak through a room while someone reads the dust pattern you leave behind in real time. The first scientists to study the caves found something strange. Near the deepest tunnel forks, like the one you passed earlier, they discovered mineral patterns arranged in spirals. Not crystal growth, not water flow, patterns that suggested intention. They were composed of small stones, bone fragments, even fossilized dung, arranged in a way that mimicked airflow currents. Some suggested the creature used these spirals as maps, navigational aids that responded to humidity and scent gradients. Others scoffed. Historians still debate whether these formations were natural artifacts or some form of primitive geolocation. You believe the first option because you've seen one. You just stepped over it. You crouch low and exhale slowly. The air carries your breath down the tunnel in curls. The lizard would smell that, not like a dog would smell bacon, more like how we feel a sneeze coming from across a room. It knew direction, speed, intent. The way a spider feels its web twitch, even if it's 5 threads away. It didn't just smell, it listened. But not with ears, at least not as you'd know them. Its body was its instrument. You follow a narrowing passage now, one that forces you to crawl. The stone is rougher here, but rhythmic. Almost carved. On your belly you hear it. The rock itself is humming. Not a song, just pressure changes. Tiny shifts like tectonic whispers. The lizard could have read those like Morse code. You pause and think of the star-nosed mole, an absurd little mammal with more sensory receptors in its snout than a human has in their entire body. It can see in complete darkness by tapping its nose 12 times per second and forming a 3D map of its surroundings through touch alone. That's impressive, but our blind lizard, it didn't just map, it ruled. Here's what the records suggest: Cavernovenator could detect tremors as faint as 0.01 Hz. That's not something humans can even comprehend. That's slower than your heartbeat. And if you moved, if you stepped on a pebble, that data became part of the environment, encoded, stored, maybe even shared through scent trails or skin oils. You know how some ants leave chemical messages on their paths so the colony can follow? This lizard might have done that with its body oil smeared across the rock like a living signature. I was here. I am always here. The deeper you go, the more confident it feels. Not you, the cave, the space around you. Like it knows itself. Like it's proud of its construction. The walls are no longer jagged but curved and sinuous, formed by centuries of slow movement. You see clusters of mineral bubbles like stalactite eggs. You don't touch them. You don't even want to look at them. Suddenly there's a shift in air pressure. A whoomp, almost too soft to register, but it tickles your eardrums. You freeze. Not in fear, more like reverence. You've just entered its chamber. A broad cavern opens, silent as a library. You kneel by instinct. The floor here is smoother than glass, etched with soft ruts, crawl paths, tail marks, perhaps generations of movement in the same pattern. You run your fingers along one and find indentations. Not scratches, not bites. More like grooves made by skin. Flexible, repetitive, ritualistic. You're standing on what might have been a territorial ring. A place where the lizard moved in circles to feel for intruders like sonar in flesh. You sit reluctantly, close your eyes, and wait. The cave answers. A shift in stone, a subtle echo. A warm puff of air across your neck. Not wind. There are old stories from the Malay archipelago about creatures called the Hantu Bisu, silent ghosts, that lived underground and never touched the surface. Locals avoided caves where the wind didn't blow. They said those places weren't hollow, they were watching. Those legends line up eerily well with what this cave is doing now. You're not just inside it, you're part of it. You open your eyes and whisper to yourself. It's not a prayer, more like a pact. I'm not food. I'm just visiting. In the far corner of the chamber, you spot a slab of stone unlike the others. It's darker, shinier. Almost obsidian, but smoother. You approach and realize it's fossilized skin. A full shed, preserved in mineral and time. You reach out and touch it. It gives. Not much. just enough to remind you this thing was made of muscle, not myth. And then the ground vibrates. Not a tremor, not a quake, just a pulse. Like a footstep miles away but coming through the earth like a whisper through a pillow. You stand up too fast, hit your head, curse softly. That's your third joke tonight. You'll take the bruise if it keeps your nerves from unraveling. Another pulse, this time closer. You think about the way elephants communicate across kilometers by stomping the ground. Think about how they can tell when a rival herd is approaching based on vibration alone. Our lizard likely did the same, but underground. Every step a message, every pause a question, every stillness a threat. And now it's listening to you. You tiptoe backward. Careful, no sudden moves. You think about the sound of your blood in your ears. You wonder if that's what it's after. The rhythm, the pulse. You make it back to the spiral pattern, now half erased by your own tracks. It's okay, you're not the king here. You just walked through his throne room. You don't walk, now you shuffle. Toes first. Heels lifted. Like a burglar in a sacred temple that happens to be made entirely of stone and breath and memory. Because that's what this place has become, a memory chamber. A mausoleum of movement. And you just disturbed it. The spiral pattern under your feet is mostly scuffed now, but part of it remains trailing off toward the left wall, toward a darker opening that looks less like a tunnel and more like a throat. You hesitate, obviously, but then something grabs you, not literally, don't worry, but emotionally. A pressure in the chest, a kind of gravitational guilt, as if walking away would be an insult to the thing that lived here. You enter the tunnel. Within a few minutes, you realize it's not a tunnel. It's a feeding chamber. The smell changes first, richer, riper. Not decay exactly, but old biology. Old processes. It smells like dried sweat, boiled urine, and rain on dead leaves. The floor turns uneven. You step on something soft. You don't look down. You already know. The flashlight flickers again. Classic horror cliché. You smack it. It obeys. Kind of. But its light hits something ahead and freezes your breath in place. Bones. Not one, not a pile, a landscape. They're arranged in layers like driftwood on a beach. You see skulls, large ones, small ones. Reptilian, mammalian, avian. Some are recognizable, others not. Your brain tries to place one that looks almost canine, but too many eye sockets. Another has tusks that curl inward like spiraled horns. None of them blink. That's a small comfort. Then between two broken ribs, you spot something else. Roots. Pale, brittle tendrils pushing up through the stone from somewhere even deeper. Wrapped around a femur, threaded through an eye socket. And they're not dry, they're wet, glossy, glistening with some kind of sap. You crouch and touch one. It pulses. No joke this time. No sarcastic commentary, just silence. Because this isn't a natural cave anymore. It's an ecosystem, one where flesh becomes soil and roots feed on memory. The feeding chamber wasn't just for the lizard, it was for everything that came after. A sort of recycling center for prehistoric carnage. You've read about this. Some fungal systems in deep caves evolved to break down bones using bacteria that metabolize calcium. There are lichens that digest minerals. Even modern ants have been found farming subterranean fungus on the corpses of beetles. You're standing in the fossilized prototype of that concept on a scale evolution barely attempts anymore. And guess what? Some of the bones are recent. You spot a metal carabiner fused to a tibia, a nylon strap embedded in calcite. You don't panic. That would be pointless. You just close your eyes, take a breath, and remind yourself that maybe they got out. Maybe they just left gear behind. And then you find the mural. Not painted, not carved, arranged. Dozens of bones, vertebrae, mandibles, scapulae, laid into the stone wall like a grotesque mosaic. At first glance, it looks random. Then you squint. No. It's deliberate. Shapes repeat. Arcs, spirals, concentric rings. The motif from earlier magnified. This wasn't just a dumping ground. This was art, or if not art, then a message. The lizard's equivalent of graffiti, a way to say I was here. I was this big, and I ate that much. Historians still debate whether the blind lizard demonstrated intelligence or simply ritual instinct. But when you see this wall, this structure made from memory and marrow, it's hard not to believe in purpose. You step back. The ceiling above you looks scarred, scraped. At some point, the lizard must have turned its body to the rock, shedding its skin against the roof. You can see the grooves, long, sinuous, patterned like drifted snow. Maybe it itched. Maybe it danced. You hear a small noise. No echo. Just crunch. Like something soft stepped on something soft. You freeze. The flashlight wavers in your hand. The light arc swings across the floor and hits a broken pelvis the size of a wheelbarrow. You wonder what broke it. Then you see the nest. Not a nest like a bird's. Not cozy or symmetrical. Just a depression in the floor, curved and lined with smooth, river-washed stones. At the center, a cluster of shell fragments. Translucent, paper-thin, still moist. Hatchlings. Tiny footprints lead away in all directions. Some drag marks, some claw marks. One set stops a few meters from the center where something larger, much larger, stepped across and erased them. You follow the big prints, not far, just enough to find the other nest. This one isn't empty. A juvenile skeleton rests inside, curled like a sleeping cat. Its skull is slightly flattened, still forming. No eyes. Still sealed sockets. Sharp, fine teeth, a full set unlike human infants. No sign of injury, just stillness. You crouch beside it and exhale. The air ripples forward, across the nest, into the dark. Something answers. Not a roar, not even a growl. Just a low, slow shuff. Like skin dragging over stone. Like something big that doesn't want to be heard but also doesn't mind if it is. You rise, flashlight trembling now. You step backward, careful, retracing your path between the root-wrapped femurs and the vertebrae mural. One final glance before you leave the chamber, and you see it. Not the lizard, just its silhouette. Part of the wall. A trick of the stone. A curve of bone, but it shifts. Ever so slightly. Breathing. Just cave wind. You don't wait to find out. As you leave, the light catches one last thing. A single human handprint on the wall coated in red mineral dust. Not old, not ancient, still wet. Your legs aren't entirely yours anymore. They move, but the way you tell them to is delayed, like commands sent through fog. Your hands clammy. Your mind half convinced this is a dream. Or maybe one of those sleep paralysis episodes that forgot to turn off. But the cave. It's as real as the tooth you bit your tongue on 20 minutes ago. The tunnel rises slightly now, not by much, but enough for gravity to feel like an old friend showing up to help you run. You take the incline gratefully, but the path itself less grateful. It's no longer smooth. It's patterned. Ripples in the rock like fossilized water waves. Except they're not water. They're footsteps. Massive four-toed impressions pressed into the floor, each print deep enough to hold soup. You kneel beside one, press your hand into it. It's wider than your shoulders. The depth tells you everything you need to know about the weight. A creature that big shouldn't be able to move through tunnels like this. But it did. Probably still does. And when it walked, oh, you can almost hear it. The stone beneath your hand hums with the memory of its gait. Thud, thud, pause. Then a faint vibration like a bass note, plucked once and forgotten. You follow the rhythm as if your feet remember it better than your brain. You're walking in the footsteps of a ruler. Not a king in robes, but something older. Something that didn't need gold or language, just mass patience and absolute silence. The blind lizard's walk was so heavy, so deliberate, it reshaped the cave itself. Seismologists studying this region discovered microfractures in the surrounding rock strata that didn't match any tectonic plate movement. Instead, they formed in cycles like seasonal footfalls. The prevailing theory. The creature walked circuits. Ritual paths, and over millennia, its steps caused a slow earthquake pattern. Not violent ones, just nudges adjustments to the Earth's skeleton. You reach a crossroads. One path continues upward, studded with mineral drips and the occasional pale mushroom. The other curls back downward and to the side where the air smells metallic and sweet. You're not supposed to want to go down, but the prints go that way. So you follow. Like an idiot. Or a disciple. There's a reason you're drawn in, though. It's not just fear, it's fascination. Curiosity sharpened by the sheer absurdity of it all. This creature wasn't just adapted to darkness, it thrived in it, dominated it, made darkness obey. Scientists hypothesize it had a muscle system unlike any known reptile, densely packed slow-firing fibers optimized for control, not speed. It didn't chase prey, it waited. Then applied just enough movement to create a seismic disturbance one that knocked its prey off balance before it even saw or didn't see what hit it. You think back to that familiar off-topic fact about sloths. They move so slowly that algae grow on their fur, helping them blend into the jungle canopy. Useless in a chase, but perfect if you're a living statue with time on your side. Our lizard wasn't slow out of weakness. It was slow because it didn't have to be fast. It only needed one strike. You step around a fallen stalagmite and into a room that doesn't feel like a room. It feels like a rib cage. That's not a metaphor. The ceiling arches above in segments. Rib-like structures formed by mineral flows, yes, but too symmetrical. Too spaced. You run your hand across the curve of one and feel a faint line like growth rings on a tree. And on the floor, you guessed it. Bones, but this time not loose. Arranged again, this time in the shape of a spiral you can walk into. You do. Slowly, inward, one ring, then another, until you reach the center where the air becomes thicker, denser, like walking into a drum. You kneel. The stone beneath you vibrates. Once, a low, sustained note. Not audible, just present. That's when it happens. You don't hear it. You feel it. A thud. Not loud, not close, but vast. Your knees tremble. Your spine twitches. A second thud. Closer. Another. Whatever's moving it isn't rushing. It doesn't need to. You back out of the spiral slowly. As you reach the edge, your light flickers again and something ahead gleams. A sheen of wet stone. No, not stone. Skin. Fossilized, perhaps. Maybe not, but smooth, patterned, pebbled like gecko hide but magnified to the size of a canoe. You freeze. It doesn't move. You blink and it's not there anymore. You swear, softly. That counts as a joke, probably. You move backward 1 foot at a time until your heel knocks against a ridge of rock. It rings. Yes, rings. Like a tuning fork. Just a subtle ping. But in this chamber, that sound bounces in every direction, forming a slow vibration that you feel in your collarbone. This, you realize, was the lizard's signal chamber, a place where it stood in perfect stillness and felt the entire cave breathe through its feet. A place where dominance wasn't roared, it was resonated. You get out, fast but not sloppy. Back through the corridor, past the soup bowl footprints, back to the tunnel's throat. As you climb upward, your legs aching, lungs burning, you hear one final thud. Not angry, not aggressive, just a reminder. You were here, and it knew. You drag yourself upward through the winding path, the stone beneath your hands cool again, too cool. The warmth of the feeding chamber still lingers on your clothes like heat soaked into fabric from something watching. And now the cold feels personal, punishing. Like the cave is icing you out. But it's not done with you yet. As the tunnel levels out, the air changes again, not cleaner but thinner. Drier. You breathe through your mouth and it tastes like limestone, like old breath filtered through a mummy's lungs. You feel hungrier now too. Not for food, for answers, for a story that makes all of this make sense. And that's when you reach the chamber the paleobiologists never talk about. It's unmarked on any map. Not that there are reliable maps for this deep, But you know you've entered something significant because of the silence. Not just quiet, but absence. No drips, no echoes, no ambient sound at all. You snap your fingers, nothing. Even your breath goes nowhere. The silence eats it. The walls here are soft, not in texture and shape. They curve like the inside of a seashell, and all along them grooves. Deep, narrow parallel. Claw marks. No. Teeth marks. Hundreds of them. Some wide, some needle-thin. All polished smooth. You're standing in a death chamber. Not a place where things died, but where dying was prepared for. The blind lizard didn't just feed here. It survived here. Alone. In the dark. For generations. And what happens in the dark when there's no food, you adapt. Or you don't. Historians still debate whether Cavernovenator had true social behavior or simply tolerated its young. But the chamber around you suggests something colder: planned starvation, a fallback system, an evolutionary insurance policy. Because those teeth marks on the wall's juvenile, this is where they turned on each other. Modern reptiles do this. Crocodile hatchlings have been known to eat one another in confined nests. Komodo dragons too, and sharks in utero. That's right, in some shark species, the biggest embryo eats the rest before they're born. So why wouldn't the blind lizard prepare for that? You run your hand along one groove and notice a ridge, a lip of bone embedded in the wall. Not placed, not fossilized, grown into it. The chamber ate its own dead, or at least made sure someone would. You turn slowly and count at least 6 separate nesting pits. Small, shallow depressions with no visible exits. No tunnels in, no tunnels out. This was a test chamber. Hatchlings were born here, and only one got out. You breathe deeper now, though your stomach turns at the thought. You were fascinated before. Now you're uneasy. It's one thing to hunt in darkness, another to train in it. This wasn't just evolution, it was refinement. You take a seat. Cross-legged on the stone, you need a moment. And while you sit there, the joke hits you. Congratulations! You're inside the world's oldest boot camp. Survival of the fittest in the most literal, awful sense. Another weird fact: while you catch your breath in some species of desert-dwelling frogs, individuals can go into a form of suspended animation for years, encased in a cocoon of mucus and dirt, just waiting for rain. No heartbeat, no movement, just potential. Makes you wonder what might still be waiting in these caves. Not living, not dead, just pausing. You hear something. A skitter. Not large, not heavy, but quick. Like a hand dragging fingernails across bark. It's coming from one of the pits. You lean forward. Bad idea. A flicker, a glint of white. Gone. You shine the flashlight toward it and catch a blur. Long, slender. Too fast to see clearly. Not the ancient lizard. Something newer. A descendant. Possibly. If the juveniles fought in here, it stands to reason that some of them still live in here. Subspecies. Miniature. Faster. Hungrier. You hear another skitter behind you. Turn too fast. Nothing. But you can feel them. Not watching, but tracking. Like sharks circling just beyond your sonar. You stand. Slowly. Adjust your gear. Back away from the pits, careful not to step too loudly. Then something clicks. Literally. A sharp tick, 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 like claws tapping in sequence, like someone counting on their fingers. Then silence. You run. Not recklessly, just fast enough to keep ahead of whatever's decided you're too slow to ignore. You sprint through the curved tunnel back toward the main passage. Your light swings wildly, catching glimpses of familiar grooves, familiar cracks, familiar footprints. And then you're out, back into the spiral chamber. The floor still remembers you, the walls still breathe. You don't care. You keep moving, upward, always upward, because down. Down is where hunger lives, where siblings eat siblings, where walls remember teeth. You pass a crack in the wall and smell sulfur, faint but sharp. A geothermal vent, maybe. Or a rotting body. You don't check. You follow the air now. Thinner cooler. There's a draft. Not strong, but real. And with it, a sound. Not footsteps, not growls, just a sigh. Low, long, and maybe not even hostile. Maybe tired. Because that's the truth, isn't it? These creatures, ancient as they are, aren't evil. They're relics. Old gods in a world that forgot how to worship. Survivors in a graveyard with no surface. You pause at the next fork. Left leads deeper. Right leads up. You don't even think. Right! You climb. It's not graceful, not athletic, more like a slow-motion panic attack in hiking boots. But up is up. And right now, gravity is the only compass you trust. Every muscle in your legs screams, but your brain is louder. It knows what you left behind the pit where siblings learned to hunt each other by feel, the whispering echoes of claws too small to belong to the thing that ruled this cave. Up ahead, the tunnel narrows into a long, ribbed corridor. Your flashlight grazes the walls and reveals a strange pattern. Soft, shallow bumps like goosebumps carved into the stone. At first, you think they're natural. Then you run your hand along one and feel it respond. That's not a joke. The wall pulses slightly beneath your fingers. Not alive, not now, but it remembers being alive. What you're touching isn't rock, it's skin. Or was. Fossilized dermal impressions. Patches of the lizard's body that wore against the cave over centuries. Or perhaps the lizard rested here so long that its skin left an imprint as detailed as a leaf in wet cement. It makes sense now. The old record said the creature's skin was its true sensory organ. Forget the tongue, forget the nose. Its entire body was a radar dish. Smooth pebbled, constantly registering airflow temperature shifts and vibration patterns. Historians still debate whether the blind lizard evolved this sensitivity as an adaptation to total darkness or if it was inherited from a surface-dwelling ancestor and simply sharpened in isolation. Either way, standing here, you feel like you're inside its memory. Or maybe its shadow. You keep moving. The corridor climbs in switchbacks and the air changes again, less sulfur, more dust. Less wet, more dry. The temperature dips and your skin tightens. You wrap your arms around yourself more out of instinct than warmth. Something about this part of the cave feels different. You hear a scrape, soft, sustained. Then another. It's not hunting, it's grooming. The walls here have long, shallow scratches, symmetrical parallel, and sometimes overlapping in concentric arcs. You run your hand across one and feel a fine mineral residue, like chalk dust. The creature rubbed against this surface again and again for a reason. And then it hits you, this is how it listened. By pressing its body against the walls, it could read the cave like a bat reads echoes, only slower, deeper. Where bats use milliseconds, the lizard used minutes, maybe hours, maybe days. Because in a world with no sun, what's the rush? Here's a weird fact to chew on. Elephants can detect rainstorms over 100 miles away just by sensing low-frequency rumbles through their feet. Some herds even begin migrating days before the first drop falls. Now imagine something older than elephants living underground that could feel the tremors of a volcanic eruption 5 valleys over. You're not walking through a tunnel anymore. You're walking through an instrument. Every rock face, every scrape, every bump is part of a larger feedback loop. The creature didn't just live in this cave, it was the cave. A slight wind brushes your face. You pause. Up ahead, the corridor splits into 2 chambers. The left hums faintly. The right is dead quiet. You follow the hum, because when you're in the belly of a prehistoric god lizard, silence feels like a dare. The chamber opens into a broad dome, a listening room. No, really. It's shaped like a satellite dish carved into the bedrock. And in the center, a single smooth pedestal of stone rises from the floor. Not naturally formed, too symmetrical. You approach it, carefully. Every step feels like a question, and the stone responds with polite stillness. At the base of the pedestal is a shallow groove, another spiral, of course. But this one's different. It has something in the center. You kneel. It's an ear bone. Human. Petrified. Perfect. You pick it up gently. It weighs almost nothing but carries more meaning than anything you've found so far. Someone was here. Someone before you. They listened too. Maybe too closely. You replace it out of respect and sit cross-legged beside the pedestal. The floor vibrates softly beneath you, like a cat purring, like the cave breathing. And for a moment, just a moment, you understand. It wasn't about hunting. It wasn't about feeding. It was about knowing. The lizard didn't just rule by fang and mass, it ruled by awareness. By being the most attuned organism in an environment designed for nothing but silence and pressure. This was its throne. Not because it sat here, but because it heard everything from here. You lie back just for a moment. The vibrations crawl up your spine, and you swear you hear it. Not a growl, not a whisper, just a wordless presence. A pressure in the air that says you're heard. You sit up quickly, too quickly. Lightheaded now. Time to go. As you exit the chamber, you glance back one last time, and the stone seems to ripple, just a flicker. Just enough to make you wonder if it was your eyes or if something else was listening back. You climb until your legs ache and your mouth tastes like metal and stone. The tunnel curves again. Of course it does, and your flashlight cuts across new territory, a slanted passage lined with smooth, shallow indentations in the walls. At first, you think they're random erosion patterns, but then you notice something. They match, each one spaced almost identically apart. The same width, the same arc, and inside each one, a tiny ridge, like the crease of an eyelid that never opened. They're fossil traces, dozens of them. You run your hand over the nearest one and realize what you're touching, an eye socket. Or rather, what used to be one. Sealed over. Reabsorbed. These are the ancestral remnants. The fossils of the transitional forms, half-seeing, half-sensing creatures that made the fateful decision to stop relying on light. Their descendants would become the blind lizard. But these were the ones who still remembered the sun, if only through instinct. You're in a graveyard of evolutionary hesitation. The story begins to take shape in your mind. Millions of years ago, when the continents were still shrugging into their current forms, a population of reptiles ventured downward, chasing cooler air, steady temperatures, and perhaps fleeing some unknown extinction above. A period of volcanic winter, maybe. A climate collapse. Something drove them inward. At first, they likely relied on what all creatures did: light, speed, and teeth. But the deeper they went, the less useful eyes became. And in caves, energy is precious. Eyes are expensive. Maintaining them costs a lot of metabolic currency. So eventually nature cashed them out. And what did it buy instead? A tongue that could read humidity like Braille. Skin that felt sound. Feet that could interpret stone. A brain that learned to listen instead of look. You pass deeper into the tunnel, the fossils thinning out as you go. The light flickers again, of course. It's practically a supporting character now, but it holds long enough for you to see what's ahead. A chamber far taller than any before, with a jagged hole in the ceiling where a collapse let in roots and debris from above. The walls here glisten, not from water but from fossil resin. Tree sap that dripped down through cracks over millennia, hardening into thin amber sheets. And inside them, preserved life. You walk slowly, tracing the contours with your fingers. Trapped insects, yes. But also feathers, scales, a fragment of something that looks like it might once have been part of a bat's wing. Life from the surface, fossilized underground. And on the floor, fossils of the surface dwellers that wandered down and didn't come back. A primate jaw. A rodent with exaggerated claws. A bird leg with 4 backward-facing toes adapted for climbing down, not up. They all came here, or fell here, and none of them left. This cave didn't just trap animals, it trapped time. One odd fact while you're trying to process all this: in the Brazilian rainforest, there's a species of ant that willingly climbs up stalks of grass to be devoured by a parasite-infested bird, completing the parasite's life cycle. Total cooperation with death. makes this cave look downright polite by comparison. You move toward the far side of the chamber and discover something else. Scratch marks. Not deep, but focused. Purposeful. They're clustered around a patch of wall stained black with mineral deposits. You touch the center and find it slightly indented. It's not stone. It's carbon. Char. You pull back, startled. Something used fire down here. But how? And why? Historians still debate whether ancient reptiles ever interacted with early humans. But here's what you're looking at: a heat source used deep in a blind lizard's domain. Not modern, no matches, no tools, just a smear of black on a wall that shouldn't remember flame. It raises a possibility you don't want to think about. What if the ancestors of Cavernovenator didn't just flee into the caves? What if they were pushed? What if something older than humans, something intelligent, drove them into the earth? You can't prove it. But the burn marks are real. So is the fossilized spearhead embedded in a stalagmite 5 feet away. Stone-tipped. Primitive. Thousands of years old. Possibly older. You kneel and study it. Then notice something more chilling. The spearhead didn't strike anything. It was offered, laid gently. Still pointed outward, as if the person who placed it wasn't trying to kill the creature. They were appeasing it. You stand and move back toward the center of the chamber. The amber walls glow faintly in the flashlight's last flickers. It's beautiful, almost warm. But you know better. These were the lizard's memories. Its museum, a place where the outside world was frozen and hung like paintings. And maybe, just maybe, it remembered what it was. Not a beast, not a monster, but a refugee. You look up at the broken ceiling. Roots hang down in clusters, twitching in unseen air currents. A few carry fragments of bone tangled in their fibers, surface life pulling back the past. You turn and exit the chamber slowly. Not from fear this time, but reverence. You're not the first to walk these halls, and if the lizard remembers anything, it remembers the sunlight, even if it never saw it. The tunnel beyond the amber chamber drops again. Of course it does. You've come to expect that by now. This place never lets you feel too high or too safe for long. But this descent feels different. Not the terrified tumble of a haunted catacomb, more like stepping into a hushed cathedral, the kind that absorbs every sound and humbles every breath. The walls narrow, but the ceiling rises. Your flashlight scans across ridged formations, ridges that look less like mineral buildup and more like pressure carvings. Deep vertical smears in the rock spaced apart with eerie consistency. Not bite marks, not claw marks, body marks. This is where they fought. You can feel it in your knees. The floor is cratered in wide patches as if something massive slammed into it repeatedly. There are no bones here, no gore, but the signs of violence are unmistakable. The blind lizards didn't just live in silence, they contested it. Historians still debate whether these reptiles were social or solitary, but in this hall, this battle corridor, you get your answer. They weren't pack hunters, but they didn't ignore each other either. They competed, not with roars or chases, but with presence. You pass what looks like a fracture in the wall, but it isn't. It's a pheromone smear fossilized, a long, oily patch of mineral-darkened stone that's slick to the touch like ancient resin. In modern reptiles, pheromones often signal territory readiness or warning. And this one feels like all three. You step back, carefully. This entire tunnel might have been a dueling ground, though not in the way you think. No bites, no wrestling, just slow, tense choreography. The blind lizards likely squared off silently. Scent glands flared, vibrations exchanged, posture adjusted, like ancient samurai, only larger, scalier, and without eyes. And here's where it gets interesting. Seismic readings from this region recorded accidentally during a mining survey in the 1980s captured low-frequency pulses matching rhythmic patterns spaced at intervals suggesting movement. Not rock slides, not water, but something walking then waiting. Walking again. Then two patterns overlapping, then one stopping. It was dismissed at the time, too weird, too slow. But if you're standing in the corridor where these creatures engaged in their slow-motion battles of pressure and patience, then those seismic records weren't errors. They were duels. And only one walked away. You step carefully between the floor divots and the next room opens like a breath held too long. It's round, larger than the others, and dead silent. No wind, no drip, just the sense of recent absence. And at the far end, 3 deep impressions in the floor. Like someone pressed a massive 4-legged weight into soft clay. You recognize the shape. These weren't footprints. They were stance prints. This was a waiting posture, a confrontation, a ritual space where the blind lizard asserted dominance without lifting a claw. You crouch beside one and press your hand into it. It's warm, not geologically, psychologically. The pressure of the past clings to it. You feel it in your ribs. Off-topic fact: in ancient Roman gladiator arenas, contestants were often paired not for fairness but for theatrical effect. Opposites, contrasts, combat as narrative. Insects do the same. Some male ants will battle in duels where neither dies, just postures until one concedes. This space might have functioned the same way. Conflict as communication, and maybe as memory. Because along the walls, shallow carvings appear, some natural, some not. Spiral shapes, wavy lines, and in one spot the outline of a lizard's torso carved deep into the stone. Stylized, too precise to be random. Was it made by the creature? Was it for the creature? You run your hand over the carved form. It matches the fossil shapes from before: the narrow snout, the deep chest, the curling spine. But this one has something extra. A mark where the eyes should be. A gouge. Deliberate, as if to emphasize their absence. A visual tribute to blindness. A sign of reverence, maybe. Or fear. You turn your head slowly. The room is echoing now, not with sound, but with weight. You can feel the air pushing down, like someone's watching even though no eyes remain. And then, a tremor. Not big, not dramatic, but the floor lifts slightly beneath your heel. Just once, like a heartbeat underfoot. You step back. Another tremor. Not danger. A gesture. Something ancient. Something still here. You back out 1 foot at a time, keeping your hand against the wall like a guide. As you reach the exit of the battle corridor, the air seems to shift behind you, like something exhaled or decided not to follow. Whatever ruled that room, it's not interested in you. Not yet. Back in the narrow tunnel, you take one last glance into the dueling chamber. Nothing moves. But the spiral on the wall pulses faintly in your mind. The scent smear clings to your nose. And under it all, the slow memory of pressure. You leave the dueling chamber behind, but it doesn't leave you. Every step forward still echoes with phantom pressure, like your bones are trying to remember a rhythm your ears can't hear. You don't want to know what it means when your bones start listening. The passage ahead tightens again. The floor levels out, coated with soft grit that puffs quietly underfoot. You think you're used to the quiet by now, but this place always finds a new way to deepen the silence. It's the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound obnoxiously loud. Like you're shouting just by staying alive. And then finally you smell it. Not dampness, not sulfur, not mold. Eggs. You don't know how you know, but you know. It's that iron-sweet, musty scent you imagine dinosaurs once buried in mounds of steaming compost. And ahead, lit only by the dying cough of your flashlight, is a sight that absolutely should not exist. A nursery. A real one. The chamber opens into a wide bowl of stone rimmed with ledges and lined with shallow indentations in the floor. Most are empty. Some aren't. You kneel beside one of the filled hollows. It holds a shattered egg. The shell is thin but not fragile. Iridescent, translucent, like dragonfly wing meets candy glass. You pinch a shard between your fingers and it flexes slightly before snapping. That shouldn't happen. Fossils don't flex. Unless these aren't fossils. You peer closer. There's moisture in the inner membrane, like the albumin hasn't completely dried. It glistens. You squint, nose wrinkling at the sour, coppery scent. And then you notice the print beside it. Not a footprint, a drag mark. Whatever hatched out of that egg was blind hungry and not interested in sticking around to cuddle. You stand slowly and take in the rest of the room. There are dozens of nests here, some with eggs still intact, quiet, matte, dust-covered domes, some broken open, some chewed open, and others are shattered from the inside and the outside. That's when the shape of the cycle starts to form. The hatchlings didn't just emerge. They fought their way out, against each other, against something bigger. And if that wasn't bad enough, you spot the skeleton. Not lizard, human. Curled fetal beside a nest, one arm draped protectively around an egg as if to cradle it. Your stomach turns. You kneel hoping to find some rational explanation. A lost explorer. A scientist who stayed too long, but the bones are old. Not ancient, just forgotten. No pack, no rope, just a weathered necklace of bone beads and a carved stone talisman in the shape of a spiral. You don't say anything. You just stand and look at the egg he died next to. It's cracked open now, empty. A part of you wants to laugh. Another part wants to run. But both are interrupted by a sound you haven't heard in hours. A chirp, not bird-like, not melodic, just a brief staccato click, followed by another. And another. 3 distinct sounds, different pitches, different rhythms. You spin slowly. Nothing. Then the first one clicks again closer. You back toward the ledge and shine your flashlight at the far wall. And you see them. 3 of them. Juveniles. Each no bigger than a Labrador, but far too fast for your comfort. Their skin gleams faintly in the light stretched over wiry muscle. No eyes, no hesitation, just awareness. One sniffs the air with a forked tongue. Another scrapes its belly against the floor in that same pulsing rhythm you remember from the dueling chamber. But these aren't dueling. They're coordinating. Their heads tilt in unison. You whisper, "I'm not food." They click back. You have no idea what it means. You drop your flashlight. Not on purpose. It bounces once, twice, then lands beam up, illuminating the ceiling. And there, above the nursery, you see it. A single massive impression in the stone. A dome where something once rested, curled, coiled, wrapped around this chamber like a living halo. The mother. The monarch. The original. Gone now, but the shape remains. The weight remains. You retrieve your flashlight slowly, never breaking eye contact with the 3 hatchlings. One tilts its head. Another slinks sideways into a shadow. The third doesn't move at all. You walk backward toward the exit tunnel, step by step. They don't follow, but they don't forget either. You're not just some explorer now. You're the one who saw the nursery, the one who watched the new generation, the one they might remember. Just as you turn to leave, you see something scratched into the stone beside the exit. A spiral. Fresh. Not scratched by human hands. Claw tips. You're climbing again, heart still thumping from the nursery encounter, shoes caked with grit from a chamber you wish you could unsee. The tunnel here is narrow and sharp-edged. No more soft curves. No more acoustically perfect arenas. This place feels hastier, carved by a rushing current perhaps, or time in a violent mood. You duck under a low overhang and see something strange on the wall, a faint smear of red ochre. Human. Definitely. It's a handprint, child-sized. Smeared, not stamped, like the hand was shaking, and beneath it a streak of charcoal. Not a drawing, just a desperate crooked line trailing into the rock. And that's when it hits you, this part of the cave isn't just old, it's visited. The evidence mounts quickly, scraps of twine embedded in sediment, stone flakes that used to be knives, a single bead made of something iridescent and not native to the area. Humans were here, and some of them stayed longer than they meant to. You pass a little alcove in the wall and spot 3 tiny figures scratched into the stone. Not realistic, just stick forms, arms raised. A 4th figure looms beside them. Larger, abstract, no arms, no face, just a wide head and long torso like a standing lizard. The humans are leaning toward it, or maybe away. Historians still debate whether prehistoric humans interacted with giant reptiles post-extinction. But stories persist, legends of creatures below the surface, of gods that took no offerings but demanded stillness. Myths aren't facts, but they don't sprout from nothing. You keep walking. The tunnel widens into a low-roofed room that smells like rust and mushrooms. A fire pit sits in the center, filled with ash that looks recent. You crouch, touch it, still slightly warm. Someone else is in here with you. You don't shout, not because you're scared, because shouting in this place feels wrong. You whisper instead. Hello? Nothing. Then something else answers. A high, breathy whistle. Not human, not lizard, just wrong. You stand up slowly and scan the room. No visible exits, no footprints. Just more signs that this place has been visited by people who didn't leave breadcrumbs. You spot a bundle of woven reeds tucked into a rock crevice. It holds bones. Small, rodent-like, cleanly stripped. Not by a predator, but boiled. Tools used. You're not alone. You're not the first. You're not even the 100th. You find a wall of petroglyphs further in. Most are rough lines and circles and spirals, but one catches your eye. A man on his knees. Before something massive and arched, the creature is drawn with no eyes, no mouth, just curves. But somehow it radiates menace. And then another symbol beside it. A set of tally marks. 5 groups of 5. 25. Not a count. A warning or a memorial. You keep moving. The next tunnel is slick with moisture, and your boots squelch as you walk. Insects skitter underfoot, blind and pale. One runs across your shoe and disappears into a hairline crack. You don't flinch. You've moved past flinching. You emerge into another chamber, smaller this time. A kind of vestibule. At the far end, an unmistakable sight. A stone slab, carved. You blink, step closer, and see that it's not decorative. It's functional. A slab set into a raised platform like an altar or table. Etched with concentric spirals and dotted grooves. Like braille for something with claws. You place your fingers against it. The stone hums. Not sound. Pressure. Like a heartbeat beneath granite. You draw your hand back. Something about the slab feels too aware. Like it remembers being touched. Like it keeps a record. You turn to leave and nearly stumble over another object, a human skull. It's upside down, clean, cracked slightly at the temple. You crouch beside it and see another set of claw marks on the floor near it. 3 parallel lines. Not wide, not deep. Measured. Purposeful. It wasn't a kill site. It was a placement site. That's when you remember the stories from the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Tales of sacred caves where ancestors returned not to die, but to offer themselves. Not suicide, sacrifice, the ultimate silence. What if some humans didn't fear the blind lizard? What if they served it? Or worse, tried to become part of its world? You rise the wall, spinning slightly. The air feels thicker here, denser. You move back to the passage and catch a glimmer from your flashlight's edge. A footprint, human, small, child-sized, pointed inward. Then gone. You follow it. You're not sure why. You should be leaving, but your legs move anyway. Just before the tunnel veers sharply to the left, you find it. A femur, human, laid across 2 stones, balanced perfectly. Next to it, a series of tiny spirals scratched into the wall. Not carved, scratched. Repeatedly, over and over. You don't count them. You don't need to. You already know you've passed the point of forgetting this place. And the cave. It remembers you too. You walk slower now. Not out of fear, though fear is there folded into your lungs like a second breath, but out of something deeper. Reverence maybe. Or resignation. You've crossed a threshold. The place you're in isn't just a cave anymore. It's a story that never stopped being told. And you're in it now. The tunnel narrows, then flattens, and suddenly it's quiet again. Dead. Ringing quiet. You pause to listen. Not for movement. For memory. Because this part of the cave. This is where the myths were born. The floor beneath you is smooth. Too smooth. Polished. Not by water, Not by time, by friction. Countless passes of scale hide claw. By the blind lizard itself or what remains of it. You shine your flashlight across the walls and catch something you haven't seen before. Steam. Not from heat, from pressure. A warm mist rises from fractures in the stone so faint it looks like your breath is floating in reverse. And the smell, earthy, like a compost pile that never stopped moving. You've read the folklore. All over the world there are stories of whispering beasts who live below. The Maori speak of Taniwa guardians of the deep, sometimes benevolent, sometimes hungry. In the Balkans there are tales of eyeless dragons who feed on dreams. And across Southeast Asia, cave spirits called Hantu Gua demand silence lest they follow you home. None of those creatures had names, just roles. And none of those roles felt fake. You pass a section of a wall and spot something that looks like paint. Red streaks, black rings, crude figures. Yes, but not human. Not entirely. Long tails, long limbs, no faces. Some of them crouched, others curled into spirals. These weren't just monsters to the people who saw them. They were deities, or demons, or both. And you start to understand the appeal. In a world that offers chaos above ground, plagues, wars, the sun burning your skin raw, who wouldn't worship something that endures in silence? Who wouldn't fear something that never blinks? Your light flickers, then steadies. You're not alone, but not in the way you feared. The cave itself is alive. It always was. You pass another mural more detailed this time. A series of panels, almost like a comic strip, etched into the mineral wall. You read it like a story. First, a human enters the cave. Simple enough. Second, they kneel before a great coiled shape. Third, they stand eyes scratched out. Fourth, they walk deeper, leaving footprints behind them. Fifth, those footprints continue, but the person is gone. You don't know what that means, but your skin does. You move forward slower now, brushing your hand against the wall to stay grounded. The steam thickens. The air becomes syrupy. You can feel it clinging to your clothes, coating your arms, pressing against your temples. Another off-topic fact for your melting brain, deep in Movil Cave in Romania, isolated for over 5.5 million years, scientists discovered an entire ecosystem that evolved independently from the surface. Toxic air, no sunlight, and yet life thrives. Worms, scorpions, centipedes, all feeding on chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis. Life finds a way, and when it does, it forgets the rules you thought it followed. You stumble slightly and catch yourself on a shelf of stone, but the stone gives. Not crumbles, gives. It's a hide, fossilized maybe, but still soft to the touch, folded like fabric, warm, textured like shark skin and leather. You pull your hand away. It's not dead. It's preserved. You step back and see the rest of it, a swath of hide that spans several meters, embedded in the wall like a blanket. Was this a molting site or a burial? Or simply a skin shed and never touched again? You step away slowly, careful not to disturb the silence. Because now you hear it. A voice. Not words. Not sound. Just intention. A pressure in your ears. A warning in your veins. It's saying, you know me now, that's enough. You step into the final part of the tunnel and see something impossible. A staircase. Not carved by tools, not symmetrical, but a ramp of stone worn into grooves just deep enough for careful feet. Human feet. You descend. One step, then another. At the bottom, a room. Circular, small, quiet, and at its center a sculpture. Spiral-shaped, made of bone and resin, polished to a mirror sheen. No sign of who made it or how. It's not an altar. It's a memory left behind. For you. You reach out just to feel it. And the cave exhales. The steam lifts. The air clears. And behind you, etched into the exit wall, the final mural, a human figure, standing, hand outstretched, a spiral in their palm. And beside them, a lizard. Not snarling, not hunting, just waiting. You sit for longer than you probably should. Not because you're tired though your body is wrecked, but because this place invites it. The chamber hums with a stillness that feels earned. No more skittering, no more clicking juveniles, just a wide circular room where the air itself feels older than language. And then your eyes adjust to something your flashlight hasn't caught yet. The bones. They're everywhere. Not scattered, not jumbled, placed. Some upright, fused into stalagmites. Others curled in fetal poses as though they chose to rest this way. One rib cage is mid-sprawl, its arm bones extended toward the sculpture like it was reaching for warmth. But none of them are broken. None shattered or twisted. They're not victims. They're remnants, fossilized in lime and silence. You step forward carefully, the crunch under your boots muffled by a layer of ancient dust. You brush away some debris from a half-buried skull and feel the telltale ripple of ashstone mineral-packed sediment created when heat and pressure flash-seal organic matter. Like Pompeii, but deeper, older. Some of these fossils weren't placed here. They were trapped. The volcano theory comes to mind. A sudden release of gas or subterranean pressure. A plume of scalding ash. Enough to coat a room like frosting. Seal it forever. But if that were true, why is everything so intact? You reach the far wall and find another mural. This one is carved shallow, almost hesitant. It shows a spiral, of course, but within it, a shape that looks like a coiled animal. Limbs drawn in. Tail tucked. Above it what looks like rain. Or ash. You don't need a degree to interpret it. The cave sealed itself. Or was sealed. And the lizard. It didn't flee. It curled up and waited, right where you're standing. You step back, scanning the room with fresh awareness. The sculpture in the center isn't just decorative. It's positioned where the creature once lay. You're in the tomb of the blind lizard. Not buried, not decayed, just transformed. You kneel beside the sculpture. Your fingers graze the spiral's edge. It's smoother than it has any right to be. Resin and bone shouldn't hold this kind of polish after millions of years. And yet, here it is. The room vibrates faintly, just a pulse, as if something in the rock is breathing very slowly. And you remember the oldest part of the myth, the one scholars hate to cite, the one whispered in aboriginal caves and whispered in Romanian monasteries that the deep things never die. They just sleep. Off-topic fact to keep you steady, some frogs in Alaska can survive being frozen solid for weeks. Hearts stopped. Blood crystallized. Come spring, they thaw and hop away like nothing happened. If a 3-inch amphibian can pull that off, what could a 20-foot apex lizard with a heat-sensing epidermis and a metabolism slower than tree sap accomplish? You sit back. Let your flashlight fall into your lap. It flickers, then dies. You're not panicking. That left you about 2 hours ago. What's creeping up now is something more like clarity. If this really is the burial chamber, it's not a warning. It's a record. And not for humans, but for something else. Because across from the sculpture halfway up the wall, you spot something you hadn't before. A smaller spiral, chiseled shallower, delicate, and beside it, scratch marks. Fresh. 3 parallel lines. Juvenile height. Your breath hitches. This isn't a forgotten tomb. It's a school. You're not in the presence of a corpse. You're in the legacy of a lineage. And maybe, just maybe, something else was here. Not the original blind lizard, but its descendant. A caretaker. A student. A thing that still visits its ancestors' final resting place to listen. To learn. And what have you done? Walked in. Touched everything. Left footprints in sacred dust. You rise quickly. Not rudely, just with awareness. You back toward the entrance of the chamber, passing fossils whose eye sockets still feel like they're watching you. One final glance over your shoulder. The sculpture remains unchanged. But the steam, thicker now, rising again. You climb, carefully, with respect. No jokes this time. Not even a sarcastic one about haunted lizards and death museums. Because you feel it in your chest. The pressure. The weight. The watching. The lizard's not dead. Not really. Nothing down here ever is. You crawl the first few meters out of the tomb chamber like someone retracing their own escape. Hands and knees on stone, breathing slow, whisper quiet. You don't look back, not because you're scared of what's behind you, but because it feels disrespectful to stare. That wasn't just a fossil bed back there, it was a shrine. A heartbeat locked in stone. Now the tunnel tightens again. The ceiling lowers. You crouch, then crouch more. Soon you're moving like a lizard yourself, low to the ground, shoulder to wall. It's not comfortable, but it's safer, because something is moving. Not near you, but not far. A vibration through the floor, faint as a sigh in a dream. Not rhythmic, not random. It feels curious, not hunting, checking. You move faster, flashlight off now, letting your eyes adjust to the gentle grays of bioluminescence from above. It's faint spiderwebs of light across the stone like moss that only glows when you're not looking straight at it. And then you hear it. The click. Just one. Soft, but deliberate. A greeting. A test. You freeze. Then silence again. It doesn't follow. Not yet. You stand slowly in a wider corridor, now marked with something strange rows of oval depressions in the floor spaced in pairs. Tracks, perhaps, but not walking ones, more like sitting ones. You kneel beside one, brush it with your fingers. It's warm. Not hot, not even body temperature, but warmer than the air around it. You realize these are resting spots, not random, reused. This is a roost, and maybe not for one. Maybe not for anything that's left. Because scattered across the chamber are new bones, fresh ones, not fossilized, not mineralized, still wrapped in traces of sinew. You recognize some: rabbit, small deer, others you don't want to recognize. No human remains, but a boot sits tucked in a corner. Not ancient, canvas and rubber, modern, torn along the sole. Beside it, a radio, long dead. You pick it up, turn the knob. Nothing. But the static that doesn't come is louder than anything you've heard so far. You put it back, then above you a fissure. A crack in the ceiling where cool air flows in slow spirals. The lizard would have known this spot. It would have come here to breathe, to wait, to listen for surface life. Historians still debate whether Cavernovenator ever returned to the surface in adulthood. Theories say its lungs adapted for thin air, but its limbs didn't support climbing. Still, the airflow tells a different story. This isn't an evolutionary dead end. It's a doorway, and something's recently passed through it. You lift your flashlight one last time and catch movement, your own reflection distorted in a slick patch of stone that's too smooth. Something slid through here recently. Something large. Heavy. Quiet. You press your ear to the rock. Nothing. And then, a breath. From behind the wall. Not in your face. Not aggressive. Just present. You pull away. Your mind races back through the stories of cave dragons, whisper beasts, eyeless gods that traded sight for stillness. What if the legends weren't cautionary tales? What if they were field notes? Humanity has always made myths to explain what it fears. But sometimes myths are what's left when we forget. You look at the crack in the ceiling, it's narrow. Too narrow for anything the size of that lizard, but not for its children. And that's the part that matters. Because whatever once ruled these halls didn't just survive extinction, it prepared for it. It trained replacements. You step back, heart pounding, not with fear but awe. You've seen enough. And now, finally, you climb again. The tunnel tightens one last time, but you don't resist. You squeeze upward, hands on stone, boots, scrabbling for purchase. And at the top light, not sunlight, just dim moon-reflected haze through a crack in the rock. You squeeze through, collapse into damp leaves and night air. The surface. The wind tastes different, like forgetting. You lie there for a while, listening to your own heartbeat until the wind changes direction, and with it, just barely, you hear the softest sound from below. A click. You lie still in the leaves, staring at a sky that doesn't feel real anymore. The stars blink above you, cold, distant, unblinking. It's almost funny. After all that time underground, after navigating a world ruled by something that never saw but always sensed, you return to a cosmos made entirely of light. and yet you feel more watched up here than you did down there. You sit up slowly. The crack in the earth yawns behind you, dark and quiet. You could almost convince yourself none of it happened. No blind lizard, no spiral altars, no fossil nursery with hatchlings who looked at you like they understood time. Almost. Your fingers are still coated in mineral dust. The scratches on your sleeves weren't there before. The spiral symbol you accidentally smeared with your glove is burned into your memory. You didn't imagine this. You didn't dream it. You walked into the past and something walked out with you. You don't know what it is. Maybe just awareness. Maybe something deeper. You scan the forest. It's early morning now. The sky is bluing faintly at the edges. Mist snakes between the trees. The kind of morning that makes it feel like you're the only one awake in the world. You turn back to the entrance, if you can call it that. Just a narrow seam in the rock nearly invisible from this angle. You reach out and place your hand on the stone, not pressing, just resting it there. And the stone feels warmer than it should. It remembers you, and you remember it. All the way down to the dueling corridor. The spiral nest nursery. The sculpture of bone that wasn't an altar. The lizard that might be dead but probably isn't. Historians still debate whether Cavernovenator ecaudatus went extinct naturally or retreated into isolation until the world no longer resembled the one it once ruled. But what if extinction was never the goal? What if survival meant becoming legend? In the cave, you didn't find a monster. You found a blueprint. You stand now, slowly, lightheaded but steady. And as the first true rays of sun reach the tree line, you do something strange. You close your eyes, just for a second, to feel the light as the lizard never did. And when you open them, the world feels quieter. Not in a terrifying way, in a truthful way. Like the earth is still whispering under your feet, but not in warning, in memory. The blind lizard never blinked, never needed to. Because down there in the dark, it never stopped watching. And maybe it never will. You descended into this oldest, darkest cave system on Earth. A place where light gave up and evolution rewrote the rules. There, you met the legacy of Cavernovenator ecaudatus, the blind lizard that ruled the subterranean world for millions of years, not through sight or sound, but through silence, patience, and seismic precision. It wasn't just a predator. It was a presence, a monarch of echo and pressure navigating the pitch by reading air currents and vibrations through skin more sensitive than any sonar. You followed its path past spiraled scent trails, feeding chambers filled with fossilized bones, and dueling corridors carved not by teeth but by tension. Then came the nursery, the hatchlings, the proof that extinction is a flexible word. Some bones were ancient, others weren't. You weren't alone. You never were. And beyond that, altars, artifacts, murals carved by hands, some human, some not. Each a memory etched in calcium and faith. You saw the lizard not as a monster, but as a myth that refused to die. And when you finally emerged alive but changed, you didn't bring the creature with you, but it followed anyway, not in form, in feeling. Now, when the world is still, you listen a little harder. You wait a little longer. And when your eyes are closed, you sense the pressure shift beneath your feet. That's not imagination. It's memory.